Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today I am bringing you some book recommendations with a twist because I recently asked you to give me prompts based on things that you're looking for in books, and I've picked out some books that I feel match each of these prompts. We have a mix of different genres, a mix of different types of books. There will be timestamps in the description just in case you would like to skip around. Hopefully we have a good mixture in here and you'll be able to find something that you're interested in. But we're going to start with the first prompt, which is modern adult dystopian novels. My go-to author recommendation for this is John Marrs. This is the first book in an expanded universe that he's created. It follows 5 different characters, and in this near future world, scientists have found a way to test people's DNA to identify your perfect romantic match. Essentially soulmates. So you send off a piece of your DNA, a cheek swab, and then if your perfect match, your soulmate, has also done the same, then you'll get an email saying you have a match. It's really dark and twisty, it has short chapters, and I'm not even exaggerating when I say that pretty much every single chapter has a cliffhanger at the end. It's really compulsively readable, and I think it's a great place to start with John Marrs's books. He does have some other books that are set within this same futuristic world. The Passengers, which is book 2, you could read that if you haven't read the 1. In fact, you could read any of his books that are set within this world as standalones. However, I think if you read the later books, you'll get more out of them if you have read the 1, because that forms the grounding for this future world. The bonus recommendation I have for you is Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler. This was written and published in the 90s, but it's set in the 2020s. It follows a teenage girl called Lauren who lives in this gated community in California, but the world outside has fallen apart. Vigilantes roam the streets, the government is corrupt, and there's a water shortage, so it's become really expensive. Lauren starts to form this new religion and makes plans to leave this safe community to spread the word about it. If you like TV shows such as The Walking Dead or The Last of Us, not because of the zombies, but because of how they examine humanity and they show what society would look like under extreme circumstances, then I think you would really appreciate this. The next prompt is books with cults, and for this I would recommend the Abby Mullen series by Mike Omer. The first book is A Deadly Influence. This follows a main character called Abby who is a hostage negotiator for the NYPD, and she is drawn into this case that may have links to her past. She actually grew up in a cult and was one of the few survivors. It's really twisty, it has a lot of suspense, and I think you would really like this if you enjoy crime thrillers, but you want something that's a twist on that. The main character isn't a detective, she's a negotiator, and I really liked the way that her job was incorporated into the plot. If you're in the UK, then I'm pretty sure these are available on Kindle Unlimited. I'm fairly sure I read the first book through KU on my Kindle, and then I listened to the other 2 on audio, and I really liked the audiobooks as well. A non-fiction book that I would recommend is Dinner for Vampires by Bethany Joy Lenz. This is a memoir by Bethany Joy Lenz, who, if you don't know, was in the TV show One Tree Hill, a TV show that I loved, and I had no idea what she went through. When she moved to California, she was invited to this Bible study group that turned out to be a cult, and it is horrifying what happened to her. The audiobook, which is how I consumed the story, the audiobook is narrated by her, and I think she has a great narration voice. It was really well done in my opinion, and I think her emotions really came across. The next prompt is books with tarot cards, and I do have a recommendation for this. One of my favourite series is the Rook and Rose series by M.A. Carrick, and the first book is The Mask of Mirrors, which, if you can't tell from the stenciled edges, does have a magic system involving tarot. There's also another magic system that is more scientific, and I loved the magic in this world. I thought it was so unique and creative. The world building in this, just in general, is fantastic. It's a political fantasy set in this city that feels like it's inspired by Venice. So imagine masquerade balls and canals and people travelling by boat. The plot revolves around a main character who is a con artist, and she is trying to infiltrate a noble family to secure a fortune for her and her sister. It is quite complicated, but that is what I loved. I loved the world building and the attention to detail, so would really recommend this one if that is something that you're in the mood for. The next prompt is light-hearted or comforting reads with a sprinkle of humour, and for this, the first book I could think of. When I think of a book that feels comforting to me, I think of Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. This is obviously quite a popular book, but if you haven't read it yet, I would really recommend this. Even if you don't usually read fantasy, I think a lot of people would love this because the fantasy elements aren't really that prominent. It does follow an orc called Viv, and she decides that she doesn't want to be a warrior anymore. She wants to give up that lifestyle to open a coffee shop in a city where they haven't heard of coffee, and the food descriptions are incredible. There's a really cute cast of characters in this. There's a hint of romance, which I thought was really sweet, and it's very slice of life. It's very low stakes. If, like I said, if you don't read fantasy that often, I think you'll be fine with this because the fantasy element is more like window dressing. It's not really integral to the plot. The plot is more about the characters and the process of setting up this business. There is also another book in this series. There's a prequel called Bookshops and Bone Dust, if I've got that right, and then a sequel is coming out later this year, so perfect time to pick up this book if you haven't already. I'm also going to recommend Assistant to the Villain by Hannah Nicole Mehra for this prompt. This is a cosy romantasy. I'm always hesitant to call it a romantasy because I think that might make you assume that it's going to be really dark and intense, especially when you hear the synopsis, but this is not at all a typical romantasy. That's why I want to stress that it's a cosy romantasy. It doesn't take itself too seriously. The fantasy elements aren't fully developed. They're just kind of there in the background. The plot for this follows a young woman called Evie who accepts a job working as the assistant to the villain of this world, which feels like a very generic fairy tale-like world. Again, I think even if you're not a big fantasy reader, then you'll be fine with this book. I had this assumption before I picked up the series that it was going to be very spicy, maybe because it's a series that got popular because of TikTok, and TikTok loves a spicy book, but this is not spicy. Maybe just like a little bit in some of the later books, but it is a slow burn, and I think the romance in this is really fun. Obviously, humour is subjective, so I completely understand why some people do not find this book funny, but I think if you read the first chapter or even just the prologue, then that will give you a good indication of what the humour is like and whether it's going to work for you. The Delegate Dream Department Store by Mi Lee is another bonus book that I wanted to mention for this prompt. This, I think, would also fall under the cozy fantasy umbrella, but to me it felt a bit more speculative. The concept behind this is, imagine when you fall asleep, but before you start dreaming, you go to this in-between world where there are department stores that sell dreams. Our main character applies to work at one of these department stores that sells dreams, and it's about her getting to know the different types of dreams that they sell. She gets to know the customers and the other staff that work there, and it's very wholesome and whimsical and slice of life. The only thing I would mention about the first book, because there are two books in this series, towards the end of the first book it does touch on grief and it explores that and its relation to dreaming. That part made me cry, but it felt more cathartic rather than triggering. I did still want to mention it though, just in case that is something that you would rather avoid right now. Next up we have a book with great found family rep, and I would like to take this opportunity to recommend A Witch's Guide to Magical Innkeeping by Sangu Mandana, which I read very recently and loved, specifically because of the found family. The plot for this follows a main character called Sarah who 15 years ago, when she was a teenager, she cast this spell that meant she drained most of her magic and it's never recovered. She was banished from the Witches Guild, and now as an adult she runs this inn in Lancashire with her aunt, and it's just so wholesome. Since they've been running this inn, they've had a few people come to stay who have just never left. They've become permanent lodgers because of how warm and welcoming this inn is. All of these characters, in the past, they've experienced situations where they've been made to feel unwelcome, and so they're very inclusive and understanding of other people, and it melted my heart. I cried while reading this because it was just so wholesome. There is also a hint of romance, which I liked. It was a slow burn. fun until it wasn't, and then I thought, okay, this is all getting a bit 0 to 100. I didn't care because I loved The Found Family, and I would recommend it specifically for that if that's what you're looking for. The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet is another book that I would recommend if you're looking for found family. This is cozy sci-fi, but if you don't read sci-fi, don't worry, I think you would still potentially really love this. We follow the crew of this ship called the Wayfarer. It's set way in the future where humans have left Earth, gone out into the galaxy and started to mingle with other alien species. The crew of this spaceship all come from different backgrounds and different cultures, and it's really a story about acceptance. It's really heartwarming. There is a romance, which is a very small part of the plot, but this is really about the relationships that build, the friendships as well, that build between the characters, and it's lovely. This is the first book in a series, however each book follows different characters, except they're all set in this same world, which is our world, but way in the future. You know what I mean. Next up we have a book with childhood friends to lovers, and this is the one prompt that I really struggled with because apparently I haven't read any contemporary romance books that have this prompt. I have read a historical fiction book that fits this though, so that's the one that I've gone with, and this is a book that I think I gave 5 stars, In Memoriam by Alice Wynne, which is World War I historical fiction. It follows these 2 boys who were childhood friends. They are, I think, only about 17 at the start of the book. They went to boarding school together, so they've known each other for years, but when the World War breaks out, one of them signs up to go to the front lines. It is a love story. I feel like I can't say either way whether this has a happy ending because that would be a spoiler, but if you would prefer to know that before going into the book, then you're welcome to ask and I can spoil that for you, no problem. The relationship between the 2 boys is very much a focus within the book, but it's also a very visceral portrayal of what life was like in the trenches, so just be aware of that. But I thought this was very emotive, I thought that it was very well written, and I would recommend it. I don't hear it mentioned much on BookTube. It came out a few years ago and it won the Waterstones debut fiction prize. Next up we have a book where characters are keeping secrets from each other, but for a good reason. For this I've gone with The Devotion of Suspect X by Kigo Higashino. This is a crime novel. It's a bit difficult to explain the plot for this because I think it's more enjoyable if you don't know much about it. The less you know, the better, in my opinion. But the book opens with a crime being committed, and as the reader, you see this happen, so you kind of know what the situation is. But the perspective then changes, so you're following the detective who's investigating this crime. It has this cat and mouse type element where secrets are being kept, and I just thought this was very cleverly written and it felt very unique. I think you could also say that the Greenbone Saga by Fonda Lee also has characters that are keeping secrets from each other. This has a big focus on family and loyalty, and there are characters throughout this series that deliberately keep secrets from each other. Whether it's a good reason is kind of up for debate, but this is another of my favourite series, so it's one that I wanted to recommend. It's another political fantasy, which is my favourite type of fantasy, and the plot revolves around these families who monopolise the jade industry. So jade is a type of jewel that you can wear and it gives you superhuman powers, but only if you've had the right training. Otherwise, it could kill you. The final prompt is a fast-paced fantasy that's also a mystery thriller. For this, I've gone with Inkblood Sister Scribe by Emma Tors. This is a standalone fantasy. It's set in our world, but it has a really interesting magic system, in my opinion. It also opens with a mystery and it has some more thrilling elements, so I think it fits the prompt pretty well. As I said, the book opens with this mystery. This guy who owns a magical library, it's a family library that he's been curating over the years. He opens a book within his collection and it kills him. He has 2 daughters. One of these daughters has lived with him her whole life and has now taken over the protection of this magical library. The other sister hasn't been home since she was, I think, 18. She's travelled the world and has never stayed in one place for too long, but following her father's death, it sparks this adventure type plot. I don't want to go too much into it because, as I said, this is a mystery, but I would really recommend this if you are looking for a fast-paced fantasy that's also a mystery mystery thriller. That does bring me to the end of this video. Thank you for watching if you made it this far. Let me know in the comments what books you would recommend for some of these prompts and whether you've read any of the books that I've talked about in this video. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Click subscribe if you would like to see more videos from me. But otherwise, I will see you next time. Bye.